Hello, Garland Nixon here, and I am back. I got Sean Stone, who happens to be the son of the great director Oliver Stone, and he's got a new project out that looks very interesting. We're going to talk about it. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here with Sean Stone, and we're going to have fun. And if you're not careful, you might just learn something. Let's start right here. Look, I hate to say this. When I was a kid, the Bill Cosby cartoon show used to always say that. So maybe I should leave that one alone. But let's go here. He's got this interesting project, All the President's Men. You can go to APM for All President's Men. apmdoc.tv, All the President's Men, a 6-part series exposing the deep state, a coordinated attack on Trump supporters, revealing untold stories of personal sacrifice, political corruption, and the right to preserve American democracy. And let me say this starting off, Sean, because, you know, the whole Russiagate thing from the very beginning, that was, and it was all about taking Trump out. And from the very beginning, I studied that intricately and very early. And you may not know, I'm retired law enforcement. I was the commander of the investigations division. I know how to do this stuff. And I looked at it, and from the very beginning, I'm like, well, that's a bunch of crap. It doesn't even make sense. And everything that they said, when you followed it up, I mean, it sounded great. Oh, Trump did this, and then you're like, wow, those are explosive accusations. As soon as you followed them, it was nothing. It was dead end. It was lies all the way down. And that seems to be that as we call it, the deep state or the state, whatever you want to call it, seems to have looked at Donald Trump as a problem and tried to, shall we say, neutralize that problem in various ways. And now All the President's Men, let's talk about it. What you got out there? What do people need to know? First of all, where can they find it?
Yeah, so it's the Tucker Carlson Network. As you know, Tucker started his new independent platform, right? And his Tucker Carlson Network is like an app that you can download. You can, I think, on Roku and other these platforms, you can actually, watch it there. But that's where it's streaming for the next 2 months. And basically, he's only started with doing a few documentaries. He just did James O'Keefe's border documentary and Art of the Surge, and this is the 3rd series that they're putting out.
Okay, wonderful. So let's talk about what, the thing I think people have heard a lot of the stories of what's going on. What kind of things can people find in there that, for example, let me ask you this, and I think this is a good question for you. Did you find some things in there that kind of raised your eyebrows? And, people, because I've known people that have done a lot of projects and they're like, when I started off, I knew it was bad. And then I found this. And I was like, oh, my God. Did you find things in there that you found surprising or shocking or anything like that?
So, like you, when this first started, 2016, right? The campaign, 2017, a lot of the allegations, the Steele dossier, all that stuff, the Internet Intelligence Community Assessment, the ICA comes out in January 2017. Like you, I was looking at it, and I had an interesting perspective because I was actually working for Russia Today at the time. I was hosting a show with Tyrell Ventura and Tabitha Wallace, and so we actually were kind of had some front seats to some of this. And the ICA comes out in January 2017, and it goes, here's the intelligence community assessment about the Russian interference, and I look at it and I'm like, half this document is RT.
Yes.
And it's public stuff. It's like RT did the show. It was against Hillary Clinton. It did a show saying whatever. And it's like, wait a minute. So American journalists, right? Who were like, at that time, I don't know if Ben Swan was working with us. I know it was Larry King. It was Jesse Ventura. It was Chris Hedges, a Pulitzer Prize winner. I mean, it was Tom Hartman. Tom Hartman is total lib. Yep. Now he's a total libtard, but he's like a very liberal guy. All these guys, Schultz, I think, was later. I think Schultz came like a year later. But again, it was like all these American journalists that were there at RT And I'm sitting there going, wait a minute. So the Russian collusion is a bunch of American journalists doing stories on shows and that you don't like. So you're saying that we're influencing the election? That doesn't make sense to me, right? I mean, that doesn't make sense to my mind that you can say that the interference is so vague as to basically constitute anything that I publish or you say or whatever that they don't like. And they say, well, you're tied to Russia, so it's Russian disinformation, as opposed to just the opinion of, Garland Nixon or Sean Stone, right? It's like, that's where we were. It was this kind of like, it was such a reach. So I knew that they had nothing. I'm like, if that's what you've got nothing. Because I mean, if you're talking about Russian interference, I thought you meant like, the Russians tried to hack the election machines or something, and they were trying to switch votes or, like that's real interference in election, not they've got their network has American journalists saying things that we don't like. So I have their understanding early on.
I remember that document. I read it and I reported on that document. And there was a couple of things. Number one, if I recall, one of the examples was a third-party debate.
Yeah,
which is democracy, which they ought to be doing.
Yeah,
so you hosted a third-party to debate. So that was an attempt to to completely wipe out our democracy system by allowing alternative parties to do what the mainstream media would do. The other one was you guys had somebody on there who talked about like their anti-fracking movie or something. Right. And I'm like, so what? I mean, some guy whether you like it or not, some guy made like an anti-fracking, and they bring the guy on. Hey, I understand you got a new documentary out. Yeah, it's anti-fracking. Great. Have a nice day. Oh my gosh. They tried to wipe out our elections. It was just preposterous stuff. Yeah. Like they just took any random episode that you made and said, yeah, that random episode right there, that's the one that did everything.
It goes against the establishment perspective, right? You guys are doing stories, which was what I loved about RT. We had journalists that were dissident journalists, as I mentioned, some of them, who basically were just doing things that we thought were interesting and important. And as you said, going from a third-party debate with Jill Stein from the Green Party and a few other people, that all of a sudden became election interference. I mean, that to me was like, okay, these guys are reaching. They've got nothing. So I actually didn't pay attention to Russiagate for about 5-6 years. I really did. I didn't know. And it's weird because I was doing news at RT occasionally, but I was focused on, some things that were critical of the Trump administration, some things that were pro, Trump administration, just whatever. I thought, geopolitics, whatever it was, Syria. We just had interviews and I never paid attention to what happened with George Papadopoulos. Roger Stone I knew from before, but I didn't even follow up. I didn't know what was going on with him. All of a sudden, I saw he was indicted and he was going to go to jail, but I didn't keep track of anything in that time period. It was just like I was not paying attention to the Russiagate narrative because I figured it was BS. Everything that I had seen was just such a stretch that it didn't make sense to me. So then when this project comes together, to answer your question, it all surprised me because I hadn't paid attention to it. So actually, when I looked at it, and I go, "Oh my God, there's actually a conspiracy here." But the conspiracy is not the Russians. The conspiracy is our own intelligence community, our own FBI agents, our own CIA personnel like Gina Haspel and others. That's where the conspiracy is, and Brennan and Clapper. That's where the conspiracy is. It's not with the Russians. It's with our own intelligence. And so I was really, I would say, like from the beginning, just able to look at this as an exploration into what happened case by case and to, really deconstruct the story of George Papadopoulos, the story of General Flynn, the story of Roger Stone, Carter Page, Kash Patel, who's, came on as the advisor to the intelligence community. The House Intelligence Committee under Nunez, right? And then, his key insights that Kash brought and he was one of the key people figuring out that the Clintons were involved with paying for the Steele dossier in the first place, right? So all of these different stories, Rudy Giuliani's story, I paid attention more in 2020 because of the COVID. And that was me, like, I wasn't, again, like I was looking at the COVID and going, wait a minute, there's something really wrong here. And right away, recognizing that Trump was trying to do something right by saying, hey, about hydroxychloroquine and like, let's try to treat people. And then he's being attacked for trying to treat people. Okay, there's something really wrong with that. just from a common sense perspective, because we've seen all kinds of viruses, and they would be pushing things like Cipro and other drugs that were over the counter back then. They say, oh, stock up on Cipro for the next avian flu or whatever it was. I remember a few years ago. So when someone says, hey, HCQ can help, you wouldn't smear that guy, if you really wanted to help people, right? So I knew right away there was something wrong with the COVID thing. And then with the lockdowns, it was just, Trump was trying to open the country and they were attacking him for that. I was like, all right, there's something really seriously that stinks. And when it came to the election, then likewise, it felt like this stinks. They stopped counting in 6-7 states, and those states all flip overnight. This doesn't make sense, right? So that's where I started to look at this thing as a bigger coup, you could say. And that's what this series is about, is really that it's a conspiracy and then a coup against Trump from 2016 through 2020 to 21 with the January 6th nonsense that he tried to, stage an insurrection. So essentially that's what the story was.
One of the things I find interesting about this, and once again, we're talking to Sean Stone. Sean is the son of the legendary director Oliver Stone. You can go to apmdoc.tv, All the President's Men, a 6-part series he has about a deep state coordinated attack on Trump supporters. One of the things I find interesting is people like me. My history is a left-leaning person, and I don't mean the cultural left-leaning. I mean old school left-leaning. My dad was a longshoreman, hard hat guy in a union. I knew people that were in electrical workers union, that kind of old school left that like actually cared about everyday people, not the whole fake kind of left you have now that there's only niche cultural issues that they make up about how many genders you can count, right? So, but what I found interesting is, starting probably during Russiagate, there were people like me that I'm way to the left of Trump. I don't hate Trump. I don't love Trump. He's a politician. Evaluate him for his politics and his results, right? But people like me who believe in justice, right? And started looking at it saying, that's not right. You know what I mean? And my first distrust is for the government, right? So I'm like, what they're doing looks like some kind of a coup attempt. What they're doing looks like, and I started very early in 2016 referring to Russiagate as an intelligence operation. It was so clear that it was this gigantic Five Eyes operation. I'm like, well, wait a minute. This is happening in London. They got some Alexander Downer guy from Australia, and whoever this Mifsud guy is, the mysterious person from wherever the hell, and nobody knows who this guy is. And I'm like, it seems like a Five Eyes operation that is an preemptive coup attempt, and then once it didn't work, an ongoing coup attempt. And so what was interesting is a lot of people I know who are traditional left, you know what I mean? A Glenn Greenwald, a Jimmy Dore, we're looking at this stuff saying, this is not right. This is wrong. And then we got attacked. Oh, you're a far right-wing Trump supporter. And people couldn't grasp that there are people who just simply believe in justice.
Right. That's I see you've got the Paul Robeson book there too, right?
Yeah.
There you go. No, the old school left. I mean, again, I would consider myself similar to you in many ways. Coming maybe from more of a left background, left the Democrat Party by 2008. Actually, we had conversations with Paul Robeson Jr. Did you ever meet Robeson Jr.?
He was my mentor for years.
Mm-hmm.
Paul Robeson Jr. was my mentor for many, many years. We were the best of friends.
Did he ever tell you about how Obama was chosen?
Yes, he certainly did.
Right.
I've heard read and talked to a lot of all the way back to, Brzezinski was his
mentor.
Who supposedly discovered him.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I mean, I remember conversations with Robeson Jr. in 2008, because I was watching this whole configuration of the Democrat Party. Basically, what they did to Bernie in 2016, they did to Hillary in 2008. They threw out the votes in Florida and Ohio in the primaries. And they said, oh, it was so weird. It was like the primaries. Oh, you guys held your election at the wrong time.
Yeah.
Oh, you just realized this after the fact? No one said before, hey, we're holding a primary next month. Maybe we should check the date. Maybe that's not the right time. No, they wait until she won in Florida. They said, oh, wait. No, you can't count those votes. And it was like so clear what was going on. Then I saw George Soros, who I already had a certain awareness of his diabolical financial schemes, right, globally, and relationship to British intelligence and that whole world. Essentially, he's a master manipulator, trying to get control of our Democrat Party, clearly, and that was his choice, was Obama. And then it's funny, I was having conversations like this in 2008, and Robeson Jr. basically confirming, yeah, Obama's the choice, we're going with him. So to me, it was like, all right, I'm not a Democrat, I'm not a Republican, I'm just independent, just going to watch this, right? And the same thing happened. 2016, I didn't vote, I just watched them, like, what's going on here? Because Trump's saying some things that I like. And I sat with a Rockefeller, one of the Rockefeller, family, I think it was one of Nelson's kids. And we were sitting there, and I said, I kind of like what some of the things Trump's saying about, America first. We're not going to support these foreign wars. He was like aghast. He was like, well, if we have to. This is the international order. Who's gonna enforce? No, literally, it's like who's gonna police the oceans? If we're not there, who's gonna preserve, the Suez Canal and keep the Chinese in check and all this stuff. And I'm like, okay, but I'm just talking about war. I mean, yeah, these things might, we'll still have our Navy and I don't think anyone's going to deconstruct our army, but I'm just saying as a concept, Trump horrified him, as a concept. I said, okay, there's something here. He's scaring the establishment. And when he was talking about Russia, as I mentioned, I was at RT, and I'm like, yeah, of course we should have good relations with Russia. I mean, it's a no-brainer that you would want to have good relations with one of the most powerful countries in the world, the largest landmass, very, very advanced, country in every respect, including its nuclear weapons, its scientific capacities, all these things. It's the same as China. It's like, you don't talk to China for the next 4 years. Like, we haven't talked to Russia for 4 years. It's crazy. It would be crazy to say that. So when he was saying, let's have, good relations with Russia, it just made sense. And the fact that there was such a backlash to it is when people say, well, who's behind the Russiagate conspiracy? I go, it's in the wind, because the entire establishment is against it. And the people that they went after were people like Papadopoulos and Flynn and Carter Page, who just said, hey, this makes a lot of sense. Like General Flynn, like, hey, let's cooperate with the Russians. We already are cooperating with the Russians in Syria, right? That was already happening. We've already, it makes sense to work together against Islamic terrorism to try to bring stability to the Middle East. I mean, these are just things that would make sense to someone who's a rational thinker. But this foreign policy establishment has become so pervasively neocon, right? And the neocons, as we see, the Dick Cheneys and others have literally joined the Democrat Party at this point, that you had this sort of confluence of parties were working against Trump, from the rhinos, the McCain types, that we call rhinos now, but the establishment Republicans, the Bushes, the McCains, and whatnot, Romney, to the Democrats, obviously. And it was so interesting to watch that. So I said, you know what? Good for him. I hope he can prevail against this deep state that is a very real thing for anyone who, as who studies the CIA, who studies the history of our ability to coup foreign governments. And I think that whole apparatus was brought to bear against us, starting with 2008 with the financial collapse with Obama, and not just like, obviously what he brought essentially, as you mentioned, was, to me, I think, someone who was a deep CIA asset. And I think that they brought those capacities that were used to be projected abroad. It was all being brought to bear here. And Obama was one of the instruments of it. Hillary was going to be an instrument. Biden is an instrument of it. It's all the same. It's all the same ideology, essentially, which is to destroy and create a color revolution here.
Let me ask you this: your again, All the President's Men, your 6-part series, is about the attack, a coordinated attack on Trump supporters, right? You had, what was interesting is, as you were saying, they went after Papadopoulos, they went after Roger Stone, they went after Flynn, they went after Manafort, right? And they would cook up crap and anybody who was associated with Trump. Do you think that they really believed that they could turn these people over. Well, they're so brainwashed. I really think they thought that they were going to get to these people and they were going to tell them, yes, Trump really is hugging Putin. He's got a red phone and he picks it up every day and talks to Putin for his instructions. I think they were so brainwashed they believed that. But what about the idea that there was also this, we want to attack everybody around Trump and make everybody afraid to support Trump, afraid to ally with him. You know, the fear, the chilling factor of going after everybody near Trump and making people afraid to associate or ally with him politically in any way. What do you think about the whole reasoning for going after people who were some close to Trump, some that weren't even that close to Trump, they would go after?
Well, look, just to your point, now take it all the way down to the level of women won't go on a date with you if you're a Trump supporter, right? That's the narrative now. Women, right? That's the whole narrative now. Is like women now, they got to find out if you're a Trump supporter, they can't go on a date with you. They can't be in a relationship with you. Women are divorcing their husbands if they voted for Trump. That's the narrative now being pushed, right? So imagine if that's the narrative now, all the way down to, hey, you voted for Trump, you deserve, your marriage should fall apart. You should not be in a relationship with that guy. That's where we are now in 2024. In 2016, it was entirely created. I mean, it was already building that storm. It wasn't to the place where Rudy Giuliani, gets destroyed. And what's the reason for it? Oh, he's sticking by Trump. He was stupid enough to stick by Trump. That's the narrative that they want to create, is if you're dumb enough to stick by Trump, we're going to go after you. We're going to target, we're going to indict you as a conspirator and things. We're going to, bankrupt you. Take away your bar license. I mean, all these things, spy on you. They were spying on his iCloud, everything, all of his conversations. He's supposed to have attorney-client privilege, but the moment that he started representing Trump in 2018 as a personal attorney, he starts getting spied on. I mean, it's literally sending a message, we talk about in the series. It's sending a message like, the Soviet Russia, hey, this is a show trial. If you're with Trump, this could happen to you, right? And I think it goes down the board as you say, like whether it's Papadopoulos, who met Trump once, or Carter Page, who never met Trump, right, and getting targeted and spied upon, to all the way to the January 6th people, some of whom have never had a trial. I don't even know how this is possible, in the federal District of Columbia. I guess that's that's the empire right there, right? The heart of the empire is DC. And so some of these people have never, to my understanding, have never actually gone to trial, and they've been sitting there for 3 years, almost 4 years now.
Well, one of the things I think that, it's interesting that you mentioned show trial, because I think Americans have to understand, if you study the history of, say, J. Edgar Hoover, if you study history, this has been, the U.S. has always, we've just been more subtle with it. Again, Paul Robeson, if you look at it, what happened, Paul Robeson's big thing was this: I'm afraid we're going to have war with Soviet Union and a lot of people will be killed. And we have a lot of people in Washington, D.C. that want a war with Soviet Union. Then after there was nukes, he said, hey, we'll all die in a nuclear war. So his thing was, look, no, I'm not going to denounce the Soviet Union. I'm not going to be involved. I'm not going to give help to the people that want a war with the Soviet Union, because we'll all die. I'm trying to prevent a Soviet war with the Soviet Union. That's not in the cards. That's what he was attacked for. And they cooked up, oh, well, you must be a Russian spy or a communist spy, whatever. He's like, hey, I'm not violating any law. And of course, he paid a price. So there was always an element here in the US where if somebody went too far out of where they wanted, they'd take them out, right? One way or the other. So there was, the Hoover collecting stuff on all of these members of Congress. That element has always been there, but they've been quiet about it. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? They've been subtle about it. Okay, we'll keep it below the surface, but if we need to do it, the FBI always did that kind of COINTELPRO stuff, crap like that. Now, Trump comes along and they really get scared. So I think, to me, what do you think of this? They always did it. They were subtle with it. When Trump came along, at a time they just overthrown Ukraine. Boy, they got plans now. They're going to get Russia once and for all. And Trump comes along and throws a monkey wrench in it. And I think there was a level of panic. I think there was a level of panic amongst the intelligence community, and they're like, we got to do everything. And they threw caution to the wind, so much so, if Matt Gaetz ever starts turning over rocks and looking around, woo, you know far more than I what the things you've found. Can you imagine? It would be shocking to the conscience of the American people to find out what the hell these people have been doing for the past several years.
Forget the past several years, for the past decades. I mean,
Yeah, you're right.
More than some real disclosure. I think, people are hungry. They're ready for it. I think Trump supporters are ready for it. People that are voting Democrat aren't ready for it. they're just lining.
Do you think the Democratic Party now, I keep using this word, and I really believe it, it's become a brainwashed cult. It's a cult. Yeah. The stuff they believe is so absurd that at times I'm like, you guys are really starting to sound like a cult.
Well, it's evident. It's evident. I mean, it was evident, as I mentioned, in 2020. It was evident by the masking. When masks cannot stop, or let's say the N95s, are not going to stop a virus. Right? That was evident. Fauci even said it early on.
Yes,
in the moment of honesty, right? It was, masks aren't really going to stop it. Oh, but then all of a sudden it became a cult. It was like, you must wear the mask. You must obey. You must social distance. You must stay away. You cannot gather. And it was just like on and on for 2 years. These people would not give it up. They would get their shot, their second shot, their third shot. They would still put the mask on. Oh, well, now you can take it off if you got the shot, but you might still get COVID. I mean, it's evident. That's evidence of a cult. When people will completely refuse to listen to reason or any level of common sense and just obey the authority. That's the scary part. People say Trump supporters are a cult, and I think that's a lot of projection. I don't think most people that support Trump are blindly supporting Trump. I think that they're pissed at the establishment, and they see Trump as the best vehicle by which we feel empowered to actually resist and fight back. And so that's an energy of resistance. Now they want to co-opt our resistance, and now we're the new resistance, right? The Democrats we're going to be the resistance now that Trump's coming in. I'm like, man, you guys are too late. For 4 years, we've been resisting your tyranny, straight up tyranny. Right? I mean, come on, the COVID thing, and then the January 6th thing, and then the forced vaccination, the censorship of people. I mean, oh, we're gonna go start our own Democrat Twitter now. It's like, oh yeah, we had to do that 4 years ago, guys. We had to take back Twitter in the first place. We had to go start Rumble and BitChute, right? And and Joe Rogan had to stay alive when they were trying to shut him down. I mean, it's like how much censorship we went through, and now you guys are all scared it's going to happen to you. That's what's very ironic about the situation. But back to your question about some of the things that the intelligence community look at the texts between the counterintelligence chief Peter Strzok and girlfriend Lisa Page. I mean, those texts are like that nails it right there. They're saying stuff like, he can't get in, right? He can't, right? Like he can't be next president. And Strzok being like, don't worry, we'll stop him. No, we'll stop it.
We have an insurance policy.
We have an insurance policy. All these things.
What's even more telling?
Yeah.
There's something regarding those texts that are even more telling. So the Mueller people start doing an investigation, and they discover like 20,000 texts, and they erased them. Really? Mueller erased the people erased them, which, might I add, is I would say, if I'm Matt Gaetz, I look into that and I say that you're destroying evidence, that you saw evidence of a crime,
right,
and you destroyed it. Why would you possibly see 20,000 texts in the midst of you're doing a criminal investigation, which means anybody, in a criminal investigation, I could find anything. I could start an investigation, find, holy moly, that guy stabbed somebody. There's a crime there. Yeah. Anywhere you go where the investigation leads you, ostensibly in a criminal investigation. But in that investigation, should they look at those texts and find something in those texts that implies a criminal act, they have a duty to act. But he's got like, oh boy, all of these texts between Page and Strzok. Guess we'll just have to
Comey
get
going
rid of
into
them. That to me is crime. And that is something else that
right.
clearly implies that these people are up to no good. Oh, did we lose you? Oh, I think he's frozen. I hope it's not. Let me see. Is it? No, I'm still rolling. Hopefully. There we go. You're moving a little bit, Sean. Try it again.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
Okay, go
I
ahead. Now
hear you
you're
now.
going. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say with Comey, we talk about in the series, the 30,000 emails that Hillary bleaches. And Comey goes, well, there was no intent to commit a crime. There's no intent to commit a crime. The intent is not, is it a crime doesn't, the crime is not predicated on your intent to commit it. Whether or not you can make that assertion. I mean, no one, it's hard to know someone's intent in general, right? But you can't say, well, you didn't intend to rob the bank, so we're not going to.
Sometimes it is. I can tell you this.
Yeah.
Mens rea, which is a criminal state of means criminal state of mind, right? Criminal intent. Yes, most crimes require criminal intent, but not all. For instance, there are crimes of commission and crimes of omission. As you can probably tell, this is my area of expertise. I taught this in college, right? Okay. If you fail to wear your seatbelt, and you're in a state where it's required, you're driving down the road, the cops pull you over. Hey, you don't have on a seatbelt. Oh, crap, I didn't realize it. Here's a ticket. Whatever, $25 fine, right? You did not intend to commit a crime. You didn't even think about it. But
right.
Intent wasn't required. You
That's
either
right.
got your seatbelt on. So when it comes to the requirement, you being required to do certain things with emails or with classified material, intent is irrelevant. The law says you can't put it anywhere other than on government servers, or it has to be this certain things. The issue of intent in those particular circumstances is not relevant. The law says you can't do it. The law says you got to have a seatbelt on. If you don't have a seatbelt on, you can get a ticket. And I don't care if you go to the court, the judge is not going to say, what was your state of mind at the time? He's going to say, did you have a seatbelt on? Well, no, I didn't, Your Honor. Pay the bailiff $25 on the way out. And
right.
Clearly, Hillary violated the law, and her intent was irrelevant.
Exactly.
They didn't ask intent when they went to Mar-a-Lago to check on Trump's documents.
Precisely. And by the way, again, so this is the double standard that we talk about throughout the series, the double standard of Clinton having, secret documents that no one cared about, right? I think they were in a sock drawer or something like that. Biden obviously having the documents, but he obviously doesn't. But then even when Robert, what is his name? Robert Hur,
the guy,
who basically interviews Biden and then says, oh, well, this is an elderly man who's forgetful, right? He's not all there. Okay, this is the president of the United States, he's not all there. Thank you for telling us that now, right? And then they basically say, okay, well, we want the full transcript. Merrick Garland basically says no, right? So Congress puts him in contempt. No one goes after Merrick Garland to put him in prison, but when Steve Bannon says, I think it was what was it? It was basically under instruction from Trump not to testify, and they put him in contempt. They put Steve Bannon in jail for 4 months. So we see that consistently in the last years, especially. It's like it's rules for thee, not for me, and this is, I think, what's waking a lot of people up. And going back to this again, this notion around the Democrats, like, I love it. In 2024, the election deniers are now the Democrats. And they're like, well, I can't believe it. Where did all the votes go? Biden got 81 million. Kamala's going to get, 74. I don't know by the time California finishes counting, which who knows when that'll be next year. I mean, right. So it's like, where did all those millions of votes go? And it's like, oh, maybe you did. Maybe you guys didn't get all the votes you thought you did in 2020. And it's not about 2024.
And ultimately, bottom line, you lost, and you told other people, shut up. What's interesting? In 2016, when they lost, they said, we didn't lose. They were election. It was stolen from the Russians, so they were election deniers. 2020, Trump says, I don't think I lost. I think I was robbed. An election denier, completely and totally unacceptable, right? And then 4 years later, Trump wins in a massive blowout, and they revert to becoming election deniers. And you sit there, and that's why I said, it just seems like a cult, because you can't talk to them. I do one of the radio shows I do. in Washington. I do a radio show that I do in Washington, D.C. And every week, one of the things I say to my callers is this: if you call in and agree with me, you get 1 minute. If you disagree, you get 2 minutes. Right? I'm going to make the point. It's somewhat in jest that, and I say this, the only way you grow is by making yourself uncomfortable. The way you improve yourself is by talking to people that disagree and listen to alternative perspectives, right? That's the way you move. These people are the opposite. Like you said about COVID, look, you believe this about masks or 6 feet or whatever. Fair enough. I don't hate you for that. Let's sit down and review what I have and review what you have, and let's have a discussion. And maybe you can convince me of something I didn't know. You can show me some documentation. I can do that. Let's do that. The problem I think a lot of us had is that wasn't in the cards. Mm-hmm. All we wanted was a fair opportunity to voice our questions about government policy. That's what COVID was. It was government policy that we have a right to dispute, at least question. Mm-hmm. And when we saw this group of people that not only didn't want to do that, if you said, I want to question it, they would attack you. They would give you hell for questioning it. That's when we knew something, or it suspected that something was awry, shall I say.
Exactly. Well, so for me, it started before the cult-like nature of the Democrats started. You could say the cult of personality around Obama. There was a cult of personality around Obama, and they wouldn't question things that they would have questioned before. Like, I'll take a classic example. Most Democrats, or at least a lot of Democrats I know, were critical of the Iraq War, mm-hmm. even though Hillary and Biden, all these guys were champions of it, right? But a lot of Democrats I know were outraged by the Iraq War. I would then say the Libya war, they didn't say a peep, right? It was like, yep. Not a word. You guys did the same thing. You actually, in some ways, it was just as bad, if not worse, because you unleashed a whole new, well, very similar. You unleashed a whole new brand of terrorism, overthrew a sovereign government. Gaddafi was, right and wrong. He was fundamentally not a threat. He was working really on the financial front, I think, of doing a new currency, right, based on gold and things like this. But essentially, he was taken out and destabilized that country. The Democrats will say, well, we didn't send any troops to it. Okay, you just used NATO to bomb, and it's still the same end of what was achieved as it was done with Iraq. But there was no outrage because it was Obama. That was when I started realizing, okay, these people are not serious. Because if they were serious, you hold them to the same accountability as the previous guy. It doesn't matter if he's Republican or Democrat. When Obama's allowing for NSA spying to go on, right, and people like Clapper and whatnot to go out there and lie about it, you hold him to accountability the same way if it was Bush doing that, you'd be outraged. And that was when I started to see there was a real problem of hypocrisy within the Democrats. And it got to a place of hysteria by the time of Trump, because, again, he didn't campaign on everything that I agreed with, but the predominant things of America first. Why is that a bad thing? Why is putting our country first a bad thing? When you understand that there's been a globalist takeover of the Democrat Party, and Republicans too, by the way, they're establishment Republicans. That's where the ideology came into play here. Trump was challenged. He was basically becoming a nationalist against the globalist agenda. And so many within the Democrat Party have become indoctrinated into a more globalist perspective, right? That includes basically now what we see, where it's like you have to line up and you have to say, I'm Russophobic. I'm pro LGBTQ. I'm terrified of climate change and carbon dioxide. I trust, the science. I mean, all these things that you have to line up and check every box, right? And if you don't check any of those boxes, or an RFK, right, or so many others have, like, disaffected, Michael Schellenberg types, people like, who are just saying, hey, I questioned this and they threw me out. Okay, that's a cult now. That's not a political party. Now it's a cult.
Oh, yeah. I was, you may not know this, I was on the national board of directors for the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, right? And I left during COVID because, they got, again, the ACLU, when I joined, it was because of the Skokie stuff. It was because I'm a rebellious person, and I believe in you got to have principles. And at that time, I tell people, I got a lot of heat. There was an infamous case here in Maryland where the KKK wanted to march in Annapolis, and the government said you can't. And at the ACLU, we said, can't do that. You got to give them a permit because it's a constitutional issue, right? And I went on TV all over Maryland and talked about it. People are like, I can't believe you're doing it. I'm like, it's not about the KKK. This is a principled issue, the Constitution. If you allow them to tell the KKK they can't do it because of their views, then when the next group comes along, you've already set the precedent. This has not, and see, that was the ACLU that I was with. All right, things that people are opposed to or whatever. This is the Constitution, darn it. We're going to piss people off because we're standing by the Constitution. And then I woke up one day, I'm looking around, I'm like, what the hell are they doing? They're the wokest of wokety woke on. That's all they do is the woke stuff. And the perfect example, I had since left and resigned in protest. Perfect example, when Schellenberg and Taibbi and those stuff did the Twitter files. And they found that the government was saying to social media, get rid of this person, and the social media would do it. Well, that is an ACLU case if I ever saw one. That's First Amendment. That's the government trying to end around the Constitution and say, we'll just get a private company to do it. I used to, when I would explain it to people in talks, I'd say, I taught this stuff. Let me tell you, as a police officer can't come up to your house and say, okay, there's something going on in there and I'm going to go in there. There's a body laying in there. Well, just use it, whatever, contraband of some type, and just bust in your house. They got to have a warrant. And what a police officer also, now you as a private citizen, you could walk over illegally and look in a person's window and see the body and come over to the officer and then say, officer, I saw a body in there. Then the officer can go in. You didn't act as his agent. Incidentally, you happened to see it. Here's my point.
Right.
But the officer can't say to you, I can't go over there, because that would be violating this person's, of constitutional rights. Do me a favor. You go over there and look in the window and tell me what you see, and then come back. I saw a body. Great, I'm going in. No, because you would be acting as an agent for that officer. They would be going around, doing an end around the Constitution, right?
Well, they have informants. I mean,
right.
Yeah.
That's all they did.
Yeah.
They simply said, we can't shut your speech down on Twitter. We'll call Twitter and say, Twitter shut their speech down. And then we'll just pretend that it's a private company when really it was the same thing. Twitter was effectively acting as an agent, or all the social media companies were acting as agents for the federal government. They literally sent them lists of people, throw this person off, and they throw them off. And if they didn't, they would threaten them and come down on them. So my point is this, that in that's an ACLU case if it ever was one. If there ever was one.
If it had any integrity, right?
ACLU won't touch that. Why? Because they've become, and I know, I was on the National Board of Directors. They are nothing but an arm, a cat's paw for the Democratic Party. That's all they are, an extension of the Democratic Party, the ACLU. It just so that happens the last year I was there, they took in $300 million. Last year I was there on the National Board of Directors. They took in $300 million. Where you think they got that money from?
Right. Right. No, I mean, that's the takeover of the institutions that we've seen from the people. Again, like, it's not just Soros. Soros represents it, sort of, he's a representative of it, right? Putting the money into the DAs and things like this, putting big money into the Democrat Party and various alliances. It's like they understand the power of NGOs, right? Non-government organizations, not just abroad, which obviously is useful for if you want to have a stage a color revolution, right? You have to influence the intelligentsia, the supporting institutions, and organize people accordingly. The ACLU, I think, if I'm correct, didn't they actually they didn't protest when they tried to mandate vaccines, the COVID vaccine, right?
They actually wrote an op-ed for the New York Times. And the op-ed said that a number of things, but two of the things that it said, not only do vaccine mandates not hurt your freedom, it increases your freedoms. and this is where they went awry with me. In that op-ed, they said that the vaccine was safe and effective. My position at that time was a legal position. Because I when I wrote my that's when I resigned in protest. I said, here's the problem. Legally speaking, forget the vaccine. If you go to the Pfizer website at that time, under frequently asked questions, it said, is it safe? And they said, we're still working on it. We're going to be taking in information. It was fair enough. Long-term, to determine the long-term safety. So according to Pfizer, they were still getting data to determine whether it was safe in the long term. But the ACLU wrote an op-ed that said it's safe and effective. And I said, you're a legal organization. You can't do that. You have to, at minimum, you have to take what they have and put it in it and say, according to Pfizer, they're still working on blah, 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 blah. And then you can go on with the rest of it, whether I agree with it or not. But it has to be legally sound. It's not legally sound for a company to say, we're working on it to figure out if it's safe and long term. And you're writing an op-ed as a legal organization that says it's safe now. And at that point, I said, I'm done with you people, because you're supposed to be law professors and lawyers. And you're supposed to know this.
Right. But that's it. That was, that was pretty much it. They became an instrument of the party. And that's, it. Look, we've been faced with authoritarianism for the since 2020, 21, I should say, right? Since 2020 to a certain extent, but 21, it became enshrined from the presidency. And it's the Democrat Party run authoritarianism. And so what they've done is their best to blowhorn and to announce that Trump is coming to take away your freedom and to be an authoritarian. And it's like, that's a classic example, right? Or classic tactic. When you are the authoritarian, and this goes back for, thousands of years. We are authoritarians because that's the danger, right? And it was always used. It was usually used against foreign enemies. Now they had a so-called domestic enemy in the form of Trump and his supporters to say, we are authoritarian to protect you. That's where I think all of it is now shifting. We're in a much better place we are today than we were 4 years ago. We've got a good cabinet coming in with people like Tulsi Gabbard and Matt Gaetz and Hegseth. And honestly, I'm excited to see where RFK Jr. lands in all this, and maybe Joe Ladapo from our Surgeon General down in Florida. I mean, there's a lot of good people I feel that are going to come in to change government fundamentally. I really hope that this works. Elon and Vivek doing the government accountability, essentially, right, and efficiency. I mean, all this would just be tremendous to see what could occur in this next administration.
And I'll say this, like, I'm a big Tulsi Gabbard fan, and certainly RFK. And I'll put it like this: as with any a cabinet, there's people I look at that I really like. There's people I look at that I don't really like. But it couldn't get worse than what we had theoretically, it could be worse than what we had for the last 4 years. But I mean, at that point, I'm like, I was just saying my prayers. I'm like, well, we're doomed. We're just going to we're all going to die in a nuclear war here very shortly. I was convinced that we were done. So I feel like this, at least we got a chance for survival. That we gotta start there, and we'll see what happens. It is what it is. But I was horrified that crew that was in could have any possibility of getting another 4 years. The other thing we knew is this: there was a massive censorship crackdown that was, if they won, I think the message was clear that there was a massive censorship crackdown that was coming. What do you think? Far worse than we have now.
All the tells were there. I mean, they went out and said as much. Waltz was saying there should be no protection for misinformation, right? No constitutional protection. Well, guess what? The free speech does not mean it's only correct speech or only appropriate speech or only politically correct speech.
Or only true speech.
Exactly.
False speech. I can say things that I think they're true, but they're not. Maybe so. It is. Specifically, I've done a lot of talks on this stuff. Specifically, when you talk about the First Amendment, what was it created to protect? Unpopular speech.
Yes.
So the very specific speech that they're trying to use, that they're trying to get around to stop, is what is protected. You don't need protection to stand on the corner and wave a flag and say, I love America. But the person who wants to stand on the corner and says, I hate America, whether you like it or not, that's the speech that has to be protected. You know what I'm saying?
It's probably more dangerous to stand on the corner waving a flag saying, I love America now than to burn it.
But yeah, but my point is, when they were like, well, this person's giving misinformation and they're saying that the government is wrong, I'm like, yeah, that's pretty much exactly what the First Amendment was designed for. The guy who's going to point at the government and saying they're lying to you, they're wrong, don't trust them.
Right.
That's what is, and that's the people that they were going after.
Yes, yeah. So to your point, I think it would have been a much bigger battle for us, to not have support, in the government in a sense. Again, it's like you mentioned, Trump being a politician. The good thing about him is that he's not a professional politician. Yeah, he's having to navigate politics, and like you said, no one's gonna be perfect when they navigate politics. Even if their ideals are exactly the same as yours, there are deals that have to be made. There's things that have to be negotiated. There's give and take. It's compromise, right? It's like a relationship, right? But imagine a relationship with thousands of people as opposed to one, right? There's going to be so much compromise. But that said, we have now allies going into Washington, D.C., into the heart of the belly of the beast. And if the election had not gone this way, God help us, we would have basically been faced with, like you said, just more attacks on our freedoms, on our speech, you name it. I mean, the power grabs. My biggest, for me, a big issue is always these endless wars. Because it's destroying people's lives. It's obviously killing innocents, and it's keeping us from being able to be the country that we are meant to be, which is a republic. We're not supposed to be an empire. We're not supposed to be out here just with our interests are global. We have to fight for Ukraine and all these nonsense issues. Come back to being a republic. What is in the interest of our country, and how can we negotiate fair deals with other countries that will ultimately be for mutual advantage, right? And whether it's vis-a-vis China, vis-a-vis Russia, now at least we have someone that likes to negotiate, and that's a good sign again, because I think that's what that's gonna hopefully, knock on wood, bring about peace in this next year that we haven't seen now for the last 2-3 years.
And I think it gives us an opportunity to, because when you're afraid that we're all going to die in a nuclear war, you're like, how in the hell can we stop this? If we're fortunate enough that we can get away from that, there's systemic problems. It gives us an opportunity to talk about the systemic problems, to what I mean, to have at least a discussion about people who have different concepts of the systemic problems that we have and how long-term they could be developed. We can have other conversations, but I just felt like this whole war thing with Russia or China, particularly, picking fights with people that have nukes, man, there's no way to win. How that ends. Your thoughts before we a couple more minutes. The whole January 6th thing. I remember watching that on television thinking, but I remember watching like shortly after, I'm like, well, there's the cops, and they're like moving the barricades and letting the people in, right? And then they're like guys wandering around, and the cops are taking selfies with them, and guys are like, hey, where's so-and-so's office? And the cops are like, oh, you go right down the hall and make a left. And I'm like, well, that doesn't sound like they're trying to overthrow the government. It sounds like trespassing at worst. But to be quite frank, if the cops opened the door and pointed you in the direction, I find it hard to even argue that it was trespassing. And then they tried to interpret it into a felony so they could give the people all of these years. And I'm like, that just doesn't seem right to me.
Yeah, no, we covered January 6th a bit actually in our final episode of the series with Tucker. And with Tucker, obviously we get into a lot of these issues we've been discussing about journalism, right? The nature of mainstream media and how much it serves as a watchdog, and it's supposed to be a watchdog of government, but now it becomes a lapdog of government. And so we go through his transformation, recognizing how he had bought into the lies and his own awakening process. And January 6th was one of those that he obviously did some documentaries on when he was at Fox, and is very passionate about, because again, we've got thousands of people that are still locked up on things that, even if it was a trespassing charge, they should have been gone long ago. They should not still be in prison for walking through the Capitol. Albeit it was a chaotic way to walk through, but we've seen massive protests. Remember when they were was it the Kavanaugh when they had the Kavanaugh hearings? You had thousands of people go basically, in the Capitol space, protesting his confirmation and all that. So again, this is very biased how it's done. At the same, as people point out all the time, the same year that BLM occurs and the Antifa BLM rioting occurs, and you've got billions of dollars of property damage and serious vandalism, a fire set to the courthouse, and was it in Portland, I think, and nowhere near the prosecutions that you see with the January 6th. So from my perspective, that day, I remember very clearly that when the Congress people started standing up to object to the to the votes that were being cast in those states that were very controversial, the Arizona, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Georgia being, key states, right, that decided the victory for Biden. But all those states getting votes that came after the election. I mean, that was the point. On the night of the election in 2020, Trump won. It was then they stopped counting those states and came back the next day with 90+% ballot dumps for Biden to overcome that margin of victory, that margin to claim victory. And so, congressional people were standing up on January 6th to say, hey, we want to basically discuss this. We want to debate this. And we actually want to send this back to the states to finish the investigation. And Pence said, he wrote this letter basically saying what? I'm not going to send it back to the states. I'm just going to open the ballots and count. Your objection, we'll note it, but that was pretty much it. So as Bannon and Solomon and other people, John Solomon, we interview, say, look, there were people that were riled up in the crowd. There were Proud Boy types that were plotting insurrection. Those types may have, frankly, been infiltrated. I have no doubt that all these groups are infiltrated at federal levels. We know there were FBI infiltrators. There were FBI informants in the crowd. There were Antifa types. There were police opening doors. There were all kinds of things that took place. So I think it all kind of coincided in a sense that we knew that there was going to be a certain amount of people that had a propensity for violence. And then you have instigators, provocateurs, right? It's classic. But even in this case, the two most important points are this. One, we know Trump did authorize and did say, did authorize the National Guard and did say to people like Milley and others, make sure it's safe. He never was sitting there going, yeah, we're going to rile these people up and create it. He was always focused on making sure that the Capitol had security it needed, which they didn't. That was on Pelosi and Bowser, right, the mayor. And that's also, again, that's pretty clear. And the second point being, for an insurrection, that was the most peaceful insurrection you can ask for, because no one went to the Capitol with guns. I don't know if someone had maybe something undisclosed, a knife or something, but for the most part, as far as we know, there were no weapons from the rioters. They literally were walking through there, and as you say, the QAnon shaman, Q shaman, was escorted by police through there and said it, publicly, thank you for opening the doors. So you've got an insurrection that's not an insurrection. You've got people who are maybe at some point doing some vandalism, a few people, but for the most part, people who are agitated, who are going into the Capitol, who are expressing themselves, who are, walking through. 99% of them that went in are just touring, and hanging out and milling about and observe, walking through the Capitol. They're not doing anything violent. So it's not an insurrection. It's an outburst. There are provocateurs there. Yes. There's a conspiracy to allow this to occur. Absolutely. There's not enough protection to the Capitol. 100%. But you can't say that's on Trump and this violent crowd, because there were millions of people, as we know from the records, that passed through DC in those days. I'm not sure if it was 500,000 or a million or 2 million, but there were plenty at the Capitol that could have gone in there in a very violent way if they really wanted to do an insurrection. There was enough people available.
Yeah, I'm with you. I always say, come on now. The U.S. overthrows countries all over the world, and they're going to call a bunch of guys wandering around. You know what I mean? How absurd is that? I thought it was ridiculous. Clearly, it was a political act to create a narrative that Trump wanted to overthrow the government and he was some external threat, and that the Trump support and for the last 4 years, Biden, if you listen to his rhetoric, even the State of the Union is these MAGA people, they're terrible, they're Trump supporters, he said things like, they're dangerous and all this kind of stuff, right? I mean, it was pretty terrible stuff that he was saying. And I just saw them as, okay, whether you agree with them or not politically, they've got their movement thing. It is what it is, right? But I didn't see the danger. I didn't, I think the danger they really saw it was the danger that happened last Tuesday night. That was the danger they saw, that people were fed up and they were looking for any port in a storm. And if it happened to be Trump, that was great. If somebody else had came along, they would have said, look, we've had it with you guys and we want to try something different. That's all it was. I know people that I call the clothespin vote. I know people that voted for Trump with a clothespin over their nose. People that were like, yeah, I don't like Trump. I think he's a jerk. What are you doing? I'm voting for Trump.
Right.
And it wasn't that they liked Trump. It was that they hated everybody else. And they thought to themselves either one of two things. Either maybe he'll do something different, or if I can't do anything else, the only way I can throw a punch at the elites is to vote for somebody that they hate. And the more that they said, boy, we really hate Trump, he's terrible, he's horrible, the more people said, you really hate him, don't you? Yeah. And I really hate you. So the only thing, I can't get my hands on your filthy little throats to choke you out like I really want to. So the only thing I can do is I can vote for this guy that you hate. And that way, and I think there was a lot of people who voted that. I literally know people who voted that way. And guess what? They got a right to. It's their vote. And if they want to vote as a protest vote, if they want to vote because they love a candidate, if they want to vote, if they always say the lesser of two evils, it's their stinking vote. And they got to vote a right to vote for whoever they want.
That's it. I mean, and thankfully, it looks like the election actually took place in a fair, reflective way this time, because they didn't stop counting. Although I don't know why it still takes a week.
It was too big
in California to vote to take. They still are counting in California.
It was too big,
right? But the point is,
they couldn't cheat this one.
They couldn't cheat it. There was too much awareness of what they did last time. It would have created a whole nother problem. So we'll see what they throw in the next few months. Trying to. I mean, I don't know. The Biden thing was kind of sweet yesterday. It's weird. It's like whatever actor is playing Biden. It seems like he's tall now, because all of a sudden Trump and Biden are the same size, and I'm sitting there going, "Wait a minute, what is going on?"
I thought Trump was a danger to everything. He was unthinkable, a fascist, right? And if that's the case, why would you peacefully hand a country over to a fascist? Perhaps I should believe that you were lying to me all along when you said you thought he was some kind of a fascist danger to everything.
The Democrats are calling the White House right now going, why aren't you investigating this election? What are you doing, Biden? You can't hand the power over. I see tweets all the time. Biden has every right to basically, stop Trump from becoming the next president. I'm like, wow, you're calling for insurrection, guys, on Twitter.
Yeah, perhaps you've been had. You know what I mean? Well, thanks a lot. Once again, we've been talking with Sean Stone. Sean is I guess, director. Would that be the right word?
Sure. Yeah. I'm a filmmaker. And so in this case, I directed the series. Yes.
And he is the son of the great Oliver Stone. You can find APM for All the President's Men, APMDoc.tv is where you can go and find all the info you need. Look, there's a lot of trailers. Look at all these trailers. So if you're wondering what's on there, Kash Patel, Papadopoulos, Michael Flynn, Tucker Carlson, you name it. So you can go there. There's all the trailers, all kinds of good stuff going on. Check out All the President's Men, and I'm going to check it out. And at some point, I will do a here in the next couple of weeks. I'm going to talk about it a little bit. I'll do a show and tell you what I thought. Thanks a lot, Sean. And look, feel free if you got something. If you just want to come on and talk politics or something, I got a lot of good guests, and I'd love to add a new one.
Would love that. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Wonderful. And where can people follow you on Twitter, online, whatever the stuff you're working on? Where can they follow you?
Yeah, go to seanstone.info, SEAN stone.info, and that's got my website links to my social media, to all my documentaries, including a link to All the President's Men on TCN, Tucker Carlson Network. Not Tucker. I was thinking of TCM, the classic movie network, but TCN is Tucker Carlson Network. But yeah, so seanstone.info, that's got my links to all my documentaries.
Wonderful, wonderful. And as always, follow me on Rockfin and follow me, or look, like and subscribe on YouTube. Follow me on Rockfin. Follow me also on Rumble, because we never know on any given day when we'll wake up and they'll say, Garland Nixon, you are out of here off of YouTube. So make sure you follow me. Great. I'm glad we have alternative platforms just in case things like that happen. Thanks a lot, everybody. Share this on all your social media platforms. Of course, you see everything scrolling across the bottom. If you can afford to contribute to the channel, that's great. If not, just share it on all your social media platforms. Thanks a lot. Garland Nixon, Sean Stone, we're out.
Thank you.